I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, keeping calm. The world monitors the latest developments in Syria as rebels maintain control of the country. Securing the border. A Senate committee holds a hearing on the proposed mass deportations ahead of President-elect Trump's return to office. Fighting for their lives. U.S. bishops make a request of the outgoing Biden administration. And lessons learned. A cardinal who works in the Vatican gives us his biggest takeaways from the Synod on Synodality. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. Our top story tonight, after a regime-toppling weekend, a new government is taking shape in Syria. Syrian rebels elected Mohammed al-Bashir to be the country's caretaker prime minister for the next 3 months. It comes after he met with members of the Assad government. Al-Bashir had previously headed the rebels' so-called Salvation Government in northwest Syria. This comes as many Syrians who fled the country during the civil war are returning home now. This video was taken along the border with Turkey. The Turkish government says its border gates will remain open for the safe and voluntary return of Syrian migrants. Meanwhile, back here in Washington, the Biden administration says that it will recognize and support a new Syrian government as long as it renounces terrorism. It does not want a new tyrant to replace the old one. And it's also demanding any chemical or biological weapons be destroyed and the rights of minorities and women protected. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
And that's not all, Tracy. In a statement today released by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he said the Syrian people will decide the future of Syria, that the rule of law should be respected, and warned that Syria cannot be used as a base for terror.
Israeli airstrikes target Syria, leaving heavy damage. Israel acknowledged pushing into a buffer zone inside Syria. And following the ouster of Syrian President Bashar Assad by rebel forces, while the Biden administration prepares to transfer power to President-elect Donald Trump, the administration is also focused on the transition of power in Syria.
We are in contact with all the Syrian groups, including through with including intermediaries, as we work to do whatever we can to support the Syrian people through a transition.
The Biden administration has not ruled out talks with the main Syrian rebel group, HTS, despite its designation as a terrorist organization.
As you have heard the president and the secretary say over the past couple of days so far, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is using the right words, but we will, of course, judge them not by those words, but by their actions over the coming days, the coming weeks, the coming months.
While many Syrians celebrate scenes of despair at one notorious prison just outside Damascus, where thousands came to search for their loved ones who disappeared years or even decades ago into the secretive, sprawling complex, only to find cells inside empty. As Syria starts anew, today the U.S. State Department said the transition process should lead to credible, inclusive, and non-sectarian governance.
Look, you have seen this group, HTS, take control of some of the levers of power. You have seen them work to name an acting prime minister.
Also watching the developments, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on International Justice and Peace, urging the U.S. and the world to help and pray for Syria, saying, the people of Syria want a government in Damascus that will respect and defend human rights, especially the religious freedom of minorities, uphold the rule of law, and promote economic and civil society development throughout the country.
Now, the Pope's ambassador in Syria said he's grateful the transfer of power happened, quote, without the carnage that was feared. But he says the road ahead remains very, very difficult. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thank you, Owen. And joining us now is Alberto Fernandez, EWTN News contributor. He is also a former diplomat and vice president of the Middle East Media Research Institute. Ambassador Fernandez, always good to be with you. This situation in Syria is really evolving by the moment. Let's talk about one of the latest developments, the appointment of Mohammed al-Bashir as the interim prime minister and also his ties to HTS.
Well, he's a technocratic figure, but he's an Islamist who formerly governed in the Idlib enclave that the HTS had until 2 weeks ago. So he's kind of, for them, he's a middle of the road kind of technocratic figure, although obviously he has an Islamist background.
Yeah, and as we heard from Owen in his reporting, the Biden administration is in contact with all the Syrian groups and is trying to help support a transition for the Syrian people. What do you think this transition period will look like? And do you think al-Bashir will just willingly hand over power at the end of his term?
Well, I think, first of all, this prime minister, he is a servant of others. In other words, he was clearly chosen by the most powerful figure in the fall of Assad, who is Ahmed al-Shara, also known as Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. So the interim prime minister is an important figure. He's a technocratic figure. He's going to be doing lots of stuff, but he's not the one that you have to be looking at. It's al-Jolani, who's the power behind the throne. The throne is empty, who has all the arms, who has the armed forces. He's the decision maker more than others. There are other revolutionary groups, there are other parties involved, there are exile groups involved, but he's the heavyweight in this galaxy of organizations.
Yeah, and another development, Israel conducted airstrikes on various military sites in Syria, including some naval facilities. What was the purpose of those strikes, and what is Israel's primary concern here?
Well, Israel's trying to make sure that it has as secure as possible of a relationship with whatever government comes in power or stays in power in Damascus. So what the Israelis did is they carried out extensive airstrikes on Syrian strategic weapons that the Assad regime had, like the Syrian Navy, the Syrian Air Force, missile, air defense, heavy weapons, and all of that kind of stuff. It's to make sure that if there is a government in Damascus or if there's anarchy in Syria, Israel has taken whatever precautions it can to insulate itself or protect itself from whatever may come down the pike.
Yeah, and there are also reports that the Syrian National Army launched attacks on Kurdish-led forces in Aleppo, targeting a bridge and a dam. What can you tell us about that and the significance there?
The SNA is a puppet of Turkey. You know, we talk about HTS in Damascus and al-Jolani. They are close to the Turks, but they're more independent. They're a Syrian project, an Islamist Syrian project. But the SNA, the Syrian National Army in the north, despite the name, is a puppet of Turkey to be used as a weapon against the Kurds. So they're fighting now to kill Kurds, to try to push them out of the border area. And they're kind of disconnected from what is going on in Damascus.
Alberto, just about out of time, but quickly, final thoughts.
Well, I think that, we're living in a situation of a kind of chaotic change that happens in a revolutionary period. Nobody knows what's going to happen in Syria. We should pray for the best and hope for the worst.
Yeah, and we know that you're following all of this. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you.
Thank you.
Well, dangerous wildfires raging through California as high winds cause scenes of destruction. The blazes burned in Malibu near Seaside Mansions and Pepperdine University. Thousands of residents are under evacuation orders as firefighters battle the flames. Authorities say that more than 8,000 homes and other structures are under threat. It was not immediately known how the fire started. Officials estimate more than 3.5 square miles of tree and dry brush had burned. The man arrested in connection with the shooting of a healthcare CEO is now charged with murder. He began to struggle and shout as he was brought into his extradition hearing in Pennsylvania today.
Luigi, do it. And it's completely out of touch. And it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people. It's a lived experience.
26-year-old Luigi Mangione has been denied bail and is fighting his extradition back to New York to face his murder charge. Officials say the suspect had a 3-page document that harbored, quote, ill will toward corporate America. Mangione was born and raised in Maryland and was the valedictorian of his class at his prep school. A president-elect Donald Trump ran on a promise to secure America's borders. It calls for the largest deportation in American history, using the U.S. military to deport upwards of 13 million non-citizens. But what effect could this have on the U.S. economy, families of migrant children, and even U.S. citizens? A Senate hearing took a closer look at the impacts. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us with that story. Eric.
Good evening, Tracy. As we know, the Catholic Church has long supported the dignity of a person, and that includes migrants, whether or not they're here legally or illegally. Right now, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is taking a wait-and-see approach to see if President-elect Donald Trump goes ahead with his mass deportation plan on day one. But they say that they are prepared to speak out if he does go along with this controversial proposal. Lawmakers say that mass deportations end up hurting families and destroying communities.
Would our country be better if we lost farm workers who've contributed to America for decades? Or if the military was used to round up hardworking immigrants with no serious criminal backgrounds? The answer is over and over again a resounding no.
During the hearing, a DACA recipient testified how living here in the U.S. has provided opportunities. He's now a U.S. Assistant District Attorney.
My taxes help fund my community's road, school, and overall well-being. If I were to be ripped from my community, the taxes I pay would go with me. My wife and I are also devoted Christians with strong ties to our church.
President-elect Donald Trump says he's open to a DACA compromise, and Republicans agree. Should those dreamers be allowed to stay?
Well, they've been here a long time and they came as children, and my view is that people who come here as children are not responsible. The adults are responsible.
They add the incoming president is simply trying to fix Biden's failed border policies.
So if you're here illegally, get ready to leave. If you're a criminal, we're coming after you first. If you've been paroled illegally, we're not going to give you the roots to attach yourself to our country because you should not have been here in the first place.
A Maryland resident whose daughter was murdered by an illegal migrant also testified.
My daughter is like so many other American girls that go about their life and they're just caught unawares from behind, strangled, raped, murdered. Some have been found, some have not.
Republicans say those who've committed crimes should be first on the deportation list, and then the more than 1.3 million who have received final deportation orders but remain in the U.S. And those who show up for their asylum court dates?
I think that they should be given consideration for finally respecting our laws.
The U.S. immigration system currently has a backlog of about 3.7 million court cases that could take years to resolve at the current standard. Now, the Republican-controlled Senate actually says that they are going to continue to hire more immigration attorneys and judges so that they can be able to handle the influx of these mass deportations should they take place. Now, I also want to let you know about a fall that took place. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell actually fell today. He was on his way from the luncheon to the Senate floor when he actually took a spill. Now, 2 medical responders were briefly seen entering his office. Then shortly afterwards, McConnell's staff put out a statement saying that he sustained a minor cut to his face and sprained his wrist from the fall, but he was able to resume his schedule. He is 81 years old, and you may recall it was last year that he ended up suffering a fall that caused him to have a concussion, and he was out of Congress for at least a couple of weeks. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including under arrest, an update in South Korea amid the fallout from the short-lived declaration of martial law. Plus, a group of parents are back on Capitol Hill rallying behind a bill to protect children on social media. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took the stand for the first time in his ongoing corruption trial. The trial began in 2019. Prosecutors accused Netanyahu of giving money to a media company in return for favorable coverage. Today, the prime minister criticized the media of being leftist and hounding him for his security policies. Netanyahu is Israel's first sitting prime minister to be charged with a crime. In South Korea, more fallout after last week's declaration of martial law. The country's former defense minister is now under arrest. An arrest warrant has been approved for Kim Jong-hyun on charges of rebellion and abuse of power. Kim has been detained since Sunday, accused of recommending martial law to President Yoon Suk-yeol last week. Prosecutors have up to 20 days to determine whether to indict him. The U.S. Bishops' Conference launches an initiative to ask President Joe Biden to issue pardons for 40 men currently on death row. The church leaders are asking they instead face life in prison. This comes as the outgoing president called for an end to the use of the federal death penalty while running for the White House. So far, his administration has only upheld some death sentences. The U.S. bishops have called for an end to the federal death penalty since 1980. And on their website, bishops say, quote, as President Biden prepares to leave office, please urge him to commute all current federal death sentences to terms of imprisonment before his term ends. President Biden has an extraordinary opportunity to advance the cause of human dignity by commuting all federal death sentences to terms of imprisonment and sparing the lives of the 40 men currently on federal death row. Well, lawmakers in Australia recently passed a measure to keep children off of social media until they turn 16. The ban takes effect next year. However, even supporters say that it will be hard to enforce. For now, social media platforms are set to be fined up to $33 million for systemic failures to prevent children from holding accounts. Meanwhile, here in the United States, there is renewed attention to a bill that would compel social media apps to shield children from sexual abuse, bullying, and risky stunts that can cause injury or even death. The New York Post reports that two major figures at social media giant X, including owner Elon Musk, support the Kids Online Safety Act. The bipartisan measure passed the Senate over the summer by an overwhelming margin, but it stalled in the House over Republican fears that it could lead to censorship. Earlier today, supporters gathered on Capitol Hill to try to revive interest in the bill in hopes of getting it passed before the end of the year. They included a group from Parents SOS, whose children were injured and in some cases died from online harms. And one of the members from Parents SOS joins us now, Maureen Molek. She lost her 16-year-old son as a result of social media harms. Maureen, thank you so much for being here with us, and my condolences to you. Before we start talking about COSA, tell us a little bit about your son.
My son David was a great kid. He was tall and lanky and a basketball player, and he had been playing basketball pretty much his entire life. He loved to make his friends laugh. Wasn't the greatest student, but he was just a typical 16-year-old.
Yeah, and what happened?
David was the target of cyberbullying for months. He was threatened, and it was just devastating to him. We tried to get it to stop. I mean, it was on Instagram, and we were even reported it. And we ended up having to change schools to get away from his perpetrators. But David's story really started way before that. He was addicted to social media and online gaming. After a basketball injury, he turned to that in order to fill the void for social networking for him. And over a period of about 8 months, we saw a complete change in his behavior, where he was showing all the signs of compulsive use and a behavioral addiction, where he was lying about completing his homework. He was sneaking around using his devices when he wasn't supposed to. He would get angry and aggressive when we would try to get him to stop. And then there towards the end, he started stealing from us in order to purchase virtual assets to increase his player power through some of these games. And even after he had been medically cleared to go back and play basketball, he no longer wanted to. He preferred to sit behind a screen. And that's when we really knew that we were up against something that we had never experienced before. And we were getting him the mental health supports that he needed. But it wasn't enough. And that's when the cyberbullying started. It was like the match on a bonfire that just exploded in our home.
Yeah, it's hard for parents now, even harder than it's been decades before. And you're part of a group, Parents SOS. You're in town in Washington, D.C. today to talk about COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act. Tell us why that's so important and why you want to get this passed before the end of the year.
Well, Parents SOS is made up of lots of parents whose children have died from various harms, from purchasing drugs on social media that were laced with fentanyl, kids whose children have died from suicide after sextortion, and from choking challenges. And so we've come together and we've been advocating for COSA for about 2.5 years now. This is my 14th trip to DC, and to try to encourage lawmakers to pass COSA. It passed out of the Senate 91-3, and we were just so encouraged that we were going to get it done this year, and now we're kind of in a holding pattern.
Before I let you go, do you have any advice for parents? It's so hard to navigate social media for parents and those that may be experiencing some of the same things that your son did. Any ideas or any thoughts to help them?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to have these conversations with your children and make sure that they understand about all of the different harms that are out there, and we need to protect them, but we also need to harden them. So by educating them and letting them know that no matter what they experience online, they can always come to us no matter what, and that we will help them get through it.
That's great advice. Maureen, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for all that you do. God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you, Tracy.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, a feast for all. A newly created cardinal has dinner with some special guests just one day after the consistory. Plus, we hear from a cardinal who played a main role during the Synod on Synodality. The 21 newest cardinals installed last weekend opted for a somewhat humble celebration. Cardinal Jean-Paul Vesco from Algeria spent his second night as a cardinal sharing a meal with the disadvantaged in Rome. He also handed out small gifts to those waiting outside of a homeless shelter near St. Peter's. He says that it gave him a chance to share the gift of his new appointment with others. A month after the end of the Synod, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Tannhauser had the opportunity to talk with the Secretary General of the Synod, Cardinal Mario Grech, about the Assembly's results and future steps.
Unless we are open to the Holy Spirit, unless we are familiar with the Word of God, with the teaching of the Church, no, our contribution will fail. So it is important that if we are speaking about a synodal church, it's not only a structural reform, no? It's not a reform of processes, which are necessary, but first and foremost is a spiritual conversion. It is a spiritual reality.
Were you surprised that Pope Francis did not give his own exhortation after the Synod, but accepted the final document, the summary, so to say, into church teaching, as church teaching?
In a way, yes, I was surprised, because this is the first in the history of the Synod of Bishops, no? That the Holy Father at the end says, listen, I sign this document. I make my own this document. But at the same time, I saw it coming. Why? Because the Holy Father believes in the Synodal Assembly, believes in the people of God. It is not a synod with a document that we can put on the shelf. It is something dynamic. That's why I ask, is it concluded? Because if it is dynamic, it goes on.
And then there are also the working groups that are ongoing with topics that were taken out of the second part of the Synod, so to say, to have also other groups discussing.
Is the word taken out correct? No, to be fair, no. I mean, there are 10 topics. Again, although these are study groups, I mean small groups, they are still open for the contribution of the whole Church. I made this clear during the Synod, no? I said, listen, although these are 10 groups with limited people, please feel free. I invite you to contribute.
For future synods, do you expect them to be in the same organizational structure like the Synod on Synodality, including more lay people, or will you go back to the model before, that it's a Synod for bishops?
The Synod of Bishops remain, no? But the Synod of Bishops is within the whole Church. So if one of the main themes of the Synod was recognizing the importance of the holy people of God, so the holy people of God will contribute for the benefit of the Church and society at large. How? That's something that we will see.
And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night, and God bless.